Listeners, um, apologies for that technical hitch. Um, and delighted to be here. Kevin's hopefully going to be joining me in a minute, whilst we prepare for our super duper guest. Mr. Mark Patton is going to be joining us. Um, and we've got a jam-packed show for you. So let's get the show on the road. You're listening to Ammar without Jaff this morning, live on Spice FM. And each week we bring you news, views, and one or two clues from the business world. Asian Business Connections aims to connect, support, and promote the Asian wider community. And whether you have an existing business, want to start a business, or just want to talk business, we can help. We can help. Good morning, Kevin.
Morning, Ammar. How's the weekend coming along?
Yeah, it's on its way, I think, is the thing. So thank you for jumping in at such short notice, as always. Ever
No
so
worries.
grateful that you're
Yeah,
doing so.
absolutely.
Um,
Oh,
and
what?
I thought what we'd do is just talk a little bit about some topics that we have. So, Kevin, before we do, please introduce yourself. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it?
Thanks, Ammar. So I am Kevin Allen. I'm the projects and team manager at the SME Center of Excellence, driving excellence amongst the SME and startup landscape all across the Northeast, helping build not just businesses, but also a series of understanding on bringing about strong, inclusive, and innovative ideas across the region. And that is one of the areas I work quite closely with Ammar and his business methodologies. So, pleasure to be here and happy to go on with this conversation.
Wonderful. No, thank you. Ever so glad for you coming along and stepping in and stepping up for Jap, who sent in his a note from his mother saying that he was going to be late. Is what he
No
did
worries.
in triplicate. So I apologize that this picture isn't of you, Kevin, but we have you on our screens, and really, the idea is I want to just briefly talk about the week's headlines, which are digital exclusion among UK youth and minorities. A new data reveals social exclusion as a key driver of 2024 UK riots. So, a recent study by Link, the UK's cash access and ATM network, revealed that more than 40% of people aged 18 to 24 feel digitally excluded. The one quarter of adults also report feeling excluded due to factors like the high cost of broadband, lack of digital skills, or poor connectivity. And race plays a significant role. Digital exclusion rates are about 10% higher among British Asians and Black British individuals than among white British people. What do you think about that?
I think it's a series of understanding amongst how we could possibly build more awareness amongst not just the youth, but also understanding how the youth can be empowered around being more included in not just business activities, but also engagements all across education, engagements all across community service. So it's really to bring about that strong need for getting the community, irrespective of what color or what race. It's just bringing about that sense of family and sense of belonging amongst all of us. And that is as simple as I could break it down in terms of the fundamental need at the current moment.
Mm, No, thank you. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, just to elaborate a little bit on this report, key findings on digital anxiety. So young adults report high levels of confusion and lack of confidence when completing online tasks, such as banking. And 26% of UK adults prefer digital solutions for day-to-day needs, but nearly 20% still favor in-person services, revealing a split in how people engage with technology. And the risks of a two-tiered society, as you were sort of alluding to, is experts warn that we risk creating a two-tiered society with wealthier and younger people benefiting from a digital world, while older and poorer groups face higher costs and fewer options. Digital inclusion is about more than technology. It impacts career progression, mental well-being, and social connections, is what it does. The other thing that I wanted to just briefly talk to you about, Kevin, is because yes, you are leading on the strategy and delivering that strategy for SME Center of Excellence, but you are equally supporting this whole agenda we have around inclusion, and not just from a race or, in fact, a gender perspective, but more broader than that, social mobility. And curiously, I'd highlighted this previously, that new data reveals social exclusion as key driver of 2024 UK riots. And the Guardian, where this has been published, Guardian's deep dive into the 2024 UK riots revealed clear links between social exclusion and unrest. And the key findings was that the majority of local participation, so 75% of those charged, lived within a 5 mile radius of unrest, debunking the myth of out-of-town rioters, right? There was a suggestion that everybody was coming from everywhere to have these riots. The other, and let's just quickly explore these. The other facts were over 50% of rioters came from the most deprived neighbourhoods in the UK. 36% lived in areas with poor health, more than double the national average. 29% were from the least educated communities with limited access to qualifications and opportunities. And there was undoubtedly a far-right influence, so disinformation and anti-immigrant rhetoric spread by far-right groups were key drivers of the unrest. Fabricated rumours about asylum seekers played a significant role in igniting violence and chaos. And there's a clear link between exclusion and unrest, right? So economic inequality, so economic hardship, austerity, and rising costs have left many communities feeling left behind, fueling frustration. And those feelings of exclusion were exploited by far-right groups, leading to increased participation in violent demonstrations. And there's a big distrust in institutions. There's growing distrust in public institutions, worsened by the pandemic and economic instability, which led to many to turn to far-right influences. And the demographic of rioters. So there was older participants. The average age of those charged was 32 years old, with a third being over the age of 40. And only 12% of participants were minors, which, in contrast to the 2011 riots, where, in fact, the vast majority were a lot younger. Health and education disparities. Many rioters came from areas with the worst health outcomes and lowest education levels, further highlighting the link between social deprivation and unrest. So, the fact that all of these contributing influences have impacted the community, and understandably, if you're feeling isolated, if you feel lack of opportunity, lack of ambition, lack of aspiration, that's going to further compound. And then you're seeing this disinformation, this misinformation about all of these migrants are taking our jobs, taking our wealth, taking our health. It's outrageous, is what it is. But you can understand it. You can understand it, right?
Absolutely. And it all comes down to perspective, and it all comes down to that sense of belonging and sense of acceptance, because ultimately we're all contributing to one economy, and we're all contributing to the betterment of one nation. So why is it that we have to be divided amongst ourselves at our physical appearance, or ourselves at physical or mental faith and beliefs? So what I'm no expert at this, and this is absolutely something that I personally believe in, is how should we and how could we bring about all of these communities together to not just to raise awareness, but also raise that profile of understanding how we could culturally be dependent on each other, culturally be better connected with each other. And at the end of the day, how do we all strive to build a nation that is brought about all these initiatives running together?
Mm,
And
mm.
eventually,
Sorry, go.
and eventually it all breaks down to then understanding why is it that we must have this divide, and why does that divide exist in the first place, is because there is this sense of disbelief that one working or one staying in the same nation is not contributing to the same nation. So that's what I personally feel and believe.
Yeah, and I've highlighted this as a distinct lack of equal patriotism,
Right.
right? And the flag has been hijacked by extremists. So when you see the flag of England, right, this St. George's Cross, it's normally associated with racists, right? Whereas if I reflect on any other country, and I mean that any other country, whether it's America, 4th of July, Independence Day, national holiday, celebrating its identity, the flag of America flying high by all individuals, type of thing. If you go to Turkey, you go to India, you go to the Middle East, you go to France, all of these countries, people are incredibly proud. And it's incredibly sad that we don't have that level of patriotism. And then, the points that you make, we all are here together, as in we're all part of that same society, that community. Um, and um, probably explains, Kevin, why ABC, right, AB Connections, has been working on inclusion by default, right? Because everybody deserves to be included. And in particular, recognizing that white young men have been isolated, uh, then our own ethnic and Asian young individuals have sometimes an identity crisis. They have the push-pull factors of culture, religion, various other influences. And actually, we all come the same way. We all end the same way. And the bits in the middle, if you cut any one of us, we all bleed, right? So we have so much in similarities that it seems crazy we're unable to understand and appreciate that by supporting each other, regardless of color, creed, culture, whatever it is, like what can we do to address that and support that? So I think you're doing a challenge, Annika, for the benefit of people watching, which is great. And I'm hoping that our special guest will be joining us in not that long, so you can go back to doing what you're doing, Kevin, in a minute. But in the meantime, whilst you give us a tour of this action orientated approach. I'm grateful for that. So, topic of the week is how SMEs can attract and retain top employees in a competitive market. So, skills is an incredible challenge for any business, and the competition for talent is fierce, with the job market still very much a candidate's market. Attracting and retaining top talent has become a priority for businesses across all sectors, especially SMEs. So, shifting priorities, employees, particularly millennials and Gen Z, are increasingly prioritizing flexibility, growth opportunities, and company culture over salary alone. Kevin, have you got? Kevin, strategies for attracting talent. So, offer flexibility and autonomy. There you are. Wonderful. Wonderful. I was just talking about the importance of of attracting and retaining the right talent, Kevin.
Right. And a very crucial and a very timely conversation, Ammar, given with all the fear and all the fear mongering around social media saying, oh, we've hit recession, or the market's tight, and there's people are not recruiting. Of course, there's high competition. There's a good influx of talent moving all across the globe, and everyone's moving towards a stronger approach of upskilling themselves, bringing about a lot of change towards the workplace, the environment, the culture that goes into the workplace. So a lot of changes around it, that. And what's interesting now is from both a recruitment perspective as well as a demand perspective of bringing about talent within startups, within SMEs, within corporates, is that there's almost a need in terms of now not just understanding how good the candidate is in terms of their job role and their job fit, but also how well are they culturally aligned with the culture of the organization. So that's become a big prerequisite of the organizations now as well. So going back to the point of understanding how do we address the whole issue of talent being brought into these organizations is, again, roots back to a good amount of awareness that needs to be generated, not just companies expressing or speaking about their requirements or their expectations from future employees, but also the candidates voicing themselves, saying that we are a cohort of 1 million or 2 million students who are prepped on X, Y, and Z. How can we best fit into the upcoming requirements of the market? So if there is a channel that is built where there can be that conversations happening back and forth from companies, not just corporates, but also an SME ecosystem, which we are quite proudly to announce from the SME Center of Excellence that we are bridging that gap, working amongst a lot of other organizations to bring about and empower those SME and startup leaders or future startup leaders. So that is something that I personally feel really needs to be brought about, bringing about that channel of conversation from both an employee to employer to understand the requirements of the market.
Yeah, no, great. Very, very important points and observations. I think whilst it's wrong to suggest the issues are linked in any way, but the first points around division and community cohesion, and the second around skills and developing the skills of the future and supporting individuals, all come back to collaboration, right? Come back to, can somebody take the lead? So if for example, this report and this research that the Guardian's done about deprived communities, uneducated, unhealthy communities are the ones who, were the ones who led on the rioting. Well, what are we doing to support them? What are we doing to address some of those inequalities? And it's exactly the same from a skills perspective, right? Somebody taking the lead there. Anyway, our extra special guest is here. Uh, let's get him on. You can say hello, Kevin, and then you're welcome to jump out
Right.
whilst I interrogate Mark in a minute. Let's just get his lovely photo on here. Mark Patton is the director. He's in charge of education and skills. So, really, really topical point in the conversation. So, thank you ever so much, sir, for joining us this sunny morning,
It is.
fresh
It's
as well.
absolutely beautiful outside in the city today.
It is that. And there's a beautiful picture of you, which looks like the Civic Centre in the background. But
It is.
anyway, yeah, let's pause that. Thank you, Kevin, for stepping in and stepping up for Jaff. He was
No worries.
sadly running his business. Well, not sadly, sadly for me, sadly for us, but great for him as
Oh,
always.
absolutely. It's been a pleasure, Ammar. Great to meet you, Mark. And
Good morning, Kevin. Nice to meet you too.
morning. And have fun. I'll see
Thank
All
you
right,
you very
thank
much.
next week.
you.
All right. Cheers. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Good morning, Mark.
Morning,
As
Ammar.
always, really, really grateful for you dialing in and dialing up uh, here. Do you want to start by introducing yourself, who you are, what you do? I always
Yeah,
ask this question, why you do it as well.
no problem. So I am Mark Patton. I am the Assistant Director with responsibility for education across the city. That largely means that I have responsibility for the state-funded schools in this brilliant city of ours, Newcastle upon Tyne, and statutory education from the age of 5 all the way up to 18 and beyond for those young people who've got an education, health and care plan. But also as part of the work, I and my teams work closely with our early years settings in the city for those children who are preschool. So in nurseries, childminders and other early years provisions. And obviously we work quite closely with our further education and higher educations in the city. So both of the universities and the college, Newcastle College. Why do I do what I do? So my background is teaching. I qualified as a teacher in the as some of the children that I speak to fondly refer to as the late 1900s. So that would be the
Brilliant,
1980s.
brilliant,
The
excellent.
1980s, taught for approximately 20 years in secondary education in North Tyneside, so a neighbouring local authority, and then moved into the world of local authority education provision and have been there ever since. And this is my 6th year in Newcastle, having previously worked, as I said, in North Tyneside and down in the south of the region in Hartlepool for a number of years.
Brilliant. Thank you for that. And it is always a real pleasure to have you on the show, Mark, and really grateful for you making the time. Curiously, thank you. We were talking about probably two things it'd be great to get sort of your views on, both quite disparate. One was a bit of research that came out this week from The Guardian around the riots, and it sort of some of the facts um, probably wasn't a surprise to me, but some of the statistics suggested um, possibly highlighted how dramatic those things were. So the key findings were things like so we're talking about the riots earlier on, but key findings were 75% of the people that participated lived within 5 miles. The vast majority came from deprived neighborhoods where there were health inequalities and with limited access to qualifications and opportunities. So they were the key points. And then sadly the far right providing disinformation and misinformation and anti-immigrant rhetoric, which compounded all of those things. But there was a real link between exclusion and unrest, and in particular economic inequalities, a bit of distrust in institutions, and surprisingly, this was a little bit surprising for me, was that the average age of those charged was 32 years, with a third being over the age of 40. And only 12% of participants were minors. And that's in sharp contrast to the 2011 riots, where the vast majority were. So it almost feels as if, well, actually, if you'd done some of the maths, you could potentially go, well, it could be a proportion of those that have grown up and still feel excluded, right? Is
Yeah.
what they do.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm sharing that is because I'm always mindful and conscious of any political type of conversation and such like, and you're here as an independent. Mark Patton is what you are, but something that I've had the pleasure of your 5-6 years of experience, influence, have been determined to do is address some of those educational inequalities, and in fact, not just educational, but life choices and chances. So things like NEETs, things like establishing fairs, employment connection, using employers, and all of those type of things is something that is really close to our hearts, Mark.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'll mention a couple of things about the riots nationally and regionally. Not from the point of view of wanting to dwell necessarily on the negative and the horrific impact on individuals and on businesses of that few days, but more from the point of view, and I might have said this to you separately in some other spaces, how utterly proud I was and we were of how the city's message to those people who want to disrupt this wonderful place that we all live in was, and many hundreds and thousands of people took to the streets and took to their social media channels and said, this is not what we're about in Newcastle. We don't want this. We don't want this kind of way of working and making things better. There are other ways of helping people to get to a better place than being destructive and being violent towards each other, and being violent towards property. So no, thank you very much. Don't come to Newcastle. Even if you are close, within that, as you say, within that kind of 5-10 mile radius, we don't want you here. And that was really, that was a positive message, a really positive message, because as a city and as a group of communities which make up a city, we are probably one of the most diverse places in this country in terms of culture, in terms of heritage, in terms of diversity of income. So we have some very disadvantaged communities and families in Newcastle. but we also have some very, very extraordinarily wealthy, not just financially, but in other terms, communities in Newcastle. So we are diverse in that way too. And we celebrate that diversity. And wherever possible, we work collectively together to try and bring everybody to a point where there is an acceptable kind of threshold. There is this sense of a rising tide lifts all ships, and that's what we try to aim for with the activities that you and I have talked about and worked on together in the last 5 or 6 years, to try and give everybody an equality of opportunity where possible. Try to make sure that people are aware of opportunities, because sometimes that is a significant barrier, even in the 21st century, where communication is probably the best it's ever been in this civilization of ours. There are still people who don't really quite know almost literally what's on their own doorstep. What's at the end of their street, what's at the end of their estate, what's just across the city, a bus ride away or a metro ride away, in a neighbouring authority. So we try and work really hard to make sure people are aware of those opportunities, and where individuals don't necessarily have quite what they need to take up that opportunity, in terms of qualifications or experience or other skills such as communication skills or workability skills. We try and put things in place to help them to get there. We recognize that people have very different journeys in life, and end up at very different points for a whole host of reasons, but everybody deserves a chance to be part of something, to look after themselves first and foremost and make sure they have a future that they can see and be a part of. But also, if they are part of a family or a wider family or community, that they can contribute to that in some meaningful way. Because that's what we're on this planet to do, actually, isn't it?
And you're absolutely right.
It's to contribute and make the world better for the people who are coming after us. Because we aren't here long, we're here for 80, 90 years, on average, in the Western civilization. And our job, our duty is to make sure that people come after us have the same opportunities, if not better.
This is why I love your perspective, but also your why, your purpose is exactly that. One of the things I was saying to Kevin is we all come the same way, we all go the same way, and in the middle bits, we have so much in common. Whether that's cut us and we all bleed, when there's anything that happens to us, it happens to us,
Yeah.
and there's a whole range of things that are irrespective of your color, your creed, your gender, where you live, how you live, all of those things. There are far many things that at the end of the day, we're all just human, is what we are. And I think, I think you're absolutely right to celebrate the fact that we came together and shared and showcased our unity. My concern with that, Mark, is that it wasn't everyone that came together. And my concern remains, and that which is reinforced by the research, is there was probably a couple of things that happened it wasn't just the unification. It was also the response, the broader response, right? It was like a bit like, right, stop this, and understandably, and rightly so. So those feelings of exclusion, of inequality, they haven't gone away. So
I,
it's incumbent upon us, right? And actually, it's the beginning of this year, Mark. After years and years and years of our own research and practice and lived experiences, we decided that we wanted our region, not just our city, but our region, to be the most inclusive region in the UK by the end of next year. So we started this campaign. And with the proviso and some of the key core messages have always been it should be and, it should never be or. So it shouldn't be black or white. It shouldn't be men or women. It shouldn't be LGBTQ or, whatever the opposite. It shouldn't be that. It should be and. And um, as both of us are distinctly aware of slightly different roles, but in the same space. When I was governor and chair of governors of a when I started exclusively white school, that then was one of the most deprived in the UK at the time. Then my concern during that time was and still remains um, white young boys, right, being isolated, insulated, and seeing the opportunities for everybody else, bar them. And that's why I loved the Every Child Matters, because every child matters, and that's exactly what you're saying. Is we're here to make this place a better place for those after us. As in, it'd be nice to do it whilst we're here as well to experience and see some of that. But actually, it's a legacy thing, right? Is what it is. And I still have those concerns. In fact, my concerns have been amplified. I'd suggest that the research demonstrates that all of those issues affecting people in more deprived, unequal spaces and places is far more prevalent than it's ever been. And actually, we need to spend some time, and I say we in that holistic sense, need to spend some more time going into those spaces and places and having more meaningful, authentic conversations, right? Where, I mean, the fact that the research highlights a distrust in institutions, that's sad. We've never in our history have people had such a distrust of politics and politicians than we have now. And that then influences everybody and everything else, is what it does. Yet there's some brilliant people out there, Mark, doing amazing things. It's just lost in some of that noise. So my question, $1 million question. I don't know why it's not £1 million question, but anyway, that's a different thing. But my question generally is what could we do to sort of more? Because I know we're doing a lot, but what more could we do to break down some of those perceived barriers? Because there is a huge perception here to try and address some of this. And how do we support, going back to a rising tide? Yes, I used this analogy that we were all in our boats or ships during COVID, right? But they were all of different sizes. My rubber dinghy wasn't going to do much against someone else's 400-meter yacht or whatever it is. So how do we get a bigger boat, as they would say in Jaws? You know,
Well, so yeah, I mean, and therein lies the dichotomy, doesn't it? So we've just both said that one of the things that we hold dearest, and I'm sure listeners would agree, is diversity. So we can't all have the same kind of boat, and I don't think we should all aspire to have the same kind of boat.
yeah,
That's not what we're
great point.
about.
Great point. Yeah. Yeah.
We have to recognize that there will be differences, and we have
Yeah.
to accept and celebrate the fact that we are all different. We all have different circumstances. What I think we do have to fight for, and I think we do recognize, well, I don't think, I know that we all recognize that the minimum in whatever thing you're talking about, whether it be income, whether it be um, employment opportunities, whether it be, whatever, the minimum is too low. The minimum entitlement, in inverted commas, in most things in this country at the minute is just too low. For a civilized 21st century society, there should not be people who cannot heat their homes properly. There should not be people who cannot provide a nutritious meal for themselves and their families. That should not be the case in a humane, forward-thinking society. And those are the things that we have to come together to try and do something about, rather than try and think, actually, how can we all have the same? Because that's not going to happen. That way lies madness in my view. But going back to the point that you made and the point that I made at the beginning, how we do that, how we address the fact that the minimum in some of those measures is just far too low. How we do that is as important as recognizing that we have to do something about it.
Yeah.
And being destructive and being violent is not the way to do that. And that's what the city, I think, although it was recognizing, and we all recognize that there are things that are not right, that things that do need to improve. I think what the message was around the "don't come here with that because we're not interested in it" was that's not how we do things here. Our culture here is not, we'll solve problems by civil unrest and violence and destruction. We do it by trying to sit down and talk with each other, and try and make things better through the collective. Now, I know that sounds very grand and airy-fairy, but without that approach, we may as well give up the last 20,000 years of human development. Because that's
and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. I'm always mindful, Mark, of reinforcing the broader mood music of dour and sour and pain and suffering, when in reality, and I say this, I mean, statistics and surveys I always find incredibly curious, because you can skew them however you want, right? You could, either 1 out of 9 people or 9 out of 10 people. It's, whatever this percentage of, it's either 50% of that or 50% of that. And sadly, we've become so accustomed to the negativity and this desire to see and encourage, and there's more complaining going on than complimenting, and that really bothers me. And just very briefly on that point, we were incredibly fortunate, right, to go somewhere which so many others could ill afford to, and it feels totally inappropriate for me to be saying this. Having said that, we've worked incredibly hard. No one's ever given me anything, and consequently, I don't regret being able to do some of the things that we do. Certainly, that's not at any way reflective on those less able to. But without going into any great depth or detail, it was amazing to notice the behaviors of that environment and the people in it, where they are saying we're in the happiest place in the world, and it didn't matter what you said, how you said it, their behavior was constant and consistent, right? It doesn't matter. Yeah, great. Yeah. This is up. No, yeah. And really, that becomes a bit infectious, doesn't it? It's like just 10 years ago. Think about that. Not that long in the grand scheme of things. We would complain about, and there are many other drive-throughs and fast food industries. We would complain at going through a McDonald's, and they'd go, good morning, sir. Good morning. What can we get you? Thank you. Have a great day. And you'd almost go, complain about their sort of overt happiness and Americanisms, right? Is what you'd do. But actually, you'd always appreciate it. There's someone saying, have a great day. You're naturally going to go, yeah, actually, that's a nice thing to say. It's a bit like thank you or please. It's a nice thing to say.
Exactly. Can
Um,
I
now, now, yesterday, just very briefly, not just yesterday, but every single time, it's like you drive through now and it's like, what do you want? I was like, sorry? Yeah, what do you want? And that's the response from some of the drive-throughs and vast majority of the behaviors. So all of a sudden, we've just become really angry and impatient, haven't we?
So I'm determined to be positive today, and
Brilliant. Yes.
I'm because the sun is shining, because it's Friday, because a brand new school year has begun, full of opportunities ahead. I'm gonna give you and our listeners a couple of quotations. All
Brilliant.
right.
Thank you.
So the first one, I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I absolutely, I love the books, I love the films, and I love the characters. And I've just found, I was searching for the quotation I knew was there, and I found this quotation, which I'm just going to read out, and then I'm going to read you a poem by the fantastic Spike Milligan. So the quotation I'm going to
Brilliant.
give you just to think about today is coming back to the human element, the fact that we're human beings, we're social creatures, and above everything else, we want to interact in a positive way. That's our kind of that's what most people will default to. And what one of the characters in Lord of the Rings, the wizard called Gandalf, in a conversation with one of the little hobbits, Frodo, says this: I have found it is the small things, the everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keeps the darkness at bay. Simple acts of kindness and of love. Simple acts, the please, the thank yous, the smiles. And then can I read you this? Can I read you this absolutely lovely poem by Spike Milligan? It's called, oh, I won't tell you what it's called till the end. Here it goes. Smiling is infectious. You catch it like the flu. When someone smiled at me today, I started smiling too. I passed around the corner and someone saw my grin. And when he smiled, I realized I'd passed it on to him. I thought about that smile, and then I realized its worth. A single smile, just like mine, could travel around the earth. So if you feel a smile begin, don't leave it undetected. Let's start an epidemic quick and get the world infected. And that's Spike
Beautiful.
poem called Smile.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I'm gonna quote that with your permission. I appreciate you didn't write it, but you've just shared it. Yeah, because it people ask me, sadly, Mark, and you know how much I enjoy taking selfies and velfies. In fact, I coined the term velfie, and I should get it IP'd, recorded as my own. Because in at the beginning of COVID, I reverted immediately to online, started taking online pictures, and rather than selfies, these were virtual selfies. So I entitled them Velpies. Anyway, briefly on that note, the reason why I take them isn't so that I can take a picture of me and showcase that to the world. I know what I look like. It's because I smile and encourage everybody else to do that, right? And I'm capturing a moment.
Yeah.
It was a friend's birthday yesterday, and I've got now over 11 years 170,000 pictures on my phone, right? Is what I have. And I was able to go back and do a quick search and out of hundreds of photos, capture 10, 15 over the years of us smiling in different places, spaces, somewhere he had hair, somewhere he didn't have hair, somewhere, anyway, in various, and I love that. And actually, I sit and think to myself, Why I would love to have more pictures of my parents, of their parents, and things like that. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. Very briefly, because we've got 2 minutes. You
Yeah.
mentioned it's the start of the term. Everyone's settled, Mark. Everyone, what's the highlights going on?
Yes, so we're 4 weeks in, incredibly already. Everything seems to be reasonably okay across the city. Obviously, the beginning of the year, it brings its set of challenges, particularly for those children and families starting in brand new schools. Moving from one school to another is always a bit of a testing time, and some individuals cope better with that than others, but I'm really proud to say our communities and our schools really rally around people who are finding that a bit tricky, and a bit tough. But yeah, I think it's been a good start to the year ahead, and this is always the really tricky term, the autumn term, because the lights are getting poorer. The nights get darker, the mornings get darker. We head towards cold and winter. Um, but as you know, at the end of the term, we have the excitement of that Christmas time of year. The city comes into its own with the Christmas markets, and our
Beautiful,
students
beautiful.
have returned to the university. So our population in the city has boomed in the last 2 or 3 weeks since the two universities have come back, and the city's come really alive again. So yeah, good start.
Beautiful. Right, that's us. Come to the end of the show. Thank you ever so much, sir. Love it. We need to get you on in earlier, and talk longer. Thank you ever so much for brightening up our day as well with your beautiful illustrations of poems and Gandalf and Lord of the Rings as well. So thank you ever so much, and please return soon.
My pleasure. Have a lovely weekend.